As the last sliver of the relentless sun finally dipped below the bruised horizon, casting long, distorted shadows across the wave-battered deck, a collective exhalation rippled through the weary crew. The day's brutal, exposed toil under the scorching sun or biting wind had finally drawn to its close. The familiar gruff call to quarters, a resonant shout echoing across the planking, signaled a different kind of transition. It was an unspoken invitation to descend, to exchange the raw, elemental brutality of the open deck for a deeper, more enclosed, and altogether different kind of ordeal. The tween decks.
Here, beneath the planks that had absorbed the day's relentless sun and spray, awaited the world of the pirate's restless night. The sounds began to shift, subtly at first, then with increasing dominance. The vast, howling symphony of wind and crashing waves, which had defined their waking hours, now began to recede, replaced by a more intimate, guttural orchestra from within the very bones of the vessel. The deep, continuous groan of tortured timbers, straining and complaining against the relentless torque of the sea, became the underlying rhythm. Beneath that, the sickening, ceaseless slosh of bilge water, collecting and shifting unseen in the ship's belly, whispered of rot and decay. The air, once sharp with salt and sea spray, thickened perceptibly, growing heavy, stale, and warm, a humid blanket woven from the exhalations of dozens of men. Down the narrow, steep companionway, a single dim lantern, swinging with the ship's roll, cast wavering, elongated shadows. These phantom limbs danced across rough-hewn beams, slick with condensation and grime, and over the tired, often hollowed faces of men seeking a momentary reprieve. These were not the vibrant, sun-bronzed figures of legend, but gaunt, weary souls, their eyes heavy with the weight of cumulative exhaustion. The first sighs of crew members settling into their hammocks or makeshift berths, crude pallets laid on spare cargo or coils of rope, punctuated the ship's own groans. And then the smell asserted itself. Not a single aroma, but a pervasive, layered tapestry of human existence in extreme confinement. The acrid tang of unwashed bodies, the sharp bite of salt permeating every fiber, the damp, earthy scent of rotting wood, the cloying sweetness of tar, and the faint, unsettling whiff of something truly foul from the depths of the holds. It was the scent of survival and of slow decay. Above deck, the ship's constant rolling motion had been a backdrop, a familiar, almost unnoticed rhythm of their world. But here, below deck, it became an intimate, disorienting force. A cradle that never quite settled, pitching and yawing with an unsettling capriciousness. Each lurch, each sickening drop, was felt not just in the gut, but in the bone. A continuous reminder of their fragile, floating existence. The ship's erratic dance, so keenly felt below deck, found its most intimate expression in the very cradle designed for rest, hammock. It hung, suspended between rough-hewn beams. A simple sling of coarse canvas, stretched taut by thick, tar-blackened ropes.
The material itself, far from soft, was a brutal, abrasive texture against any exposed skin. A constant, low-level discomfort that never truly faded. To climb into its limited, swinging space was an awkward contortion, a practiced maneuver in a confined world. One had to balance, twist, and slide into the narrow pocket of canvas, careful not to send it, or oneself, careening into a neighbor. Once settled, the hammock introduced its own unique, rhythmic sway, a separate, smaller motion layered upon the ship's larger, more profound roll. It was a dizzying, disorienting sensation, a ceaseless, double-layered undulation that never allowed the body to truly still. You were suspended, a vulnerable weight swinging precariously, always susceptible to a sudden lurch or a violent pitch of the ship that could send you tumbling out. Yet there was also an odd sense of containment, a paradoxical security in being held within its canvas belly, amidst a communal space where privacy was a forgotten concept. Above, the ceiling was low, oppressively close, threatening to graze your brow with every minor shift. To either side, and even beneath, were other bodies, packed tightly, each a distinct presence, exhaling the stale air. The constant minor adjustments to avoid bumping a neighbor, to prevent a knee from intruding, became a subconscious ritual throughout the night. Here, the sounds of the ship were amplified in their intimacy. The incessant creak of the ropes holding your world aloft, the rustle of your own coarse canvas as you shifted, and the soft collective exhalations of dozens of sleeping men. A cough, a sigh, a muffled groan. Each sound was a testament to unease. For a moment, by pulling a threadbare blanket or a worn coat up to the chin, one could fashion a fleeting, small, private world within this shared space, a fragile, desperate attempt at personal sanctuary in an environment utterly devoid of it. It was a brief, almost futile gesture against the encroaching reality of their existence. Yet, this fragile, almost futile gesture against the encroaching reality offered little true solace. For even within this precarious cocoon of canvas, the ship offered no true silence, no true stillness. Beyond the immediate chaos of the deck, the vessel below had its own relentless symphony of unrest, a cacophony that permeated the very fabric of rest. Deep within her belly, the timbers groaned, a guttural, tortured sound, not merely the creak of wood, but the deep, mournful lament of oak and pine straining against the relentless, crushing power of the sea. Each wave that lifted and dropped the hull evoked a chorus of protests from every joint, every beam, a constant low thrum that vibrated through the very ropes holding the hammocks into the bones of the men who slept there. Beneath the rough floorboards, an unseen, sickening reality presented itself. The ceaseless slosh of bilge water, a dark, fetid pool collecting in the ship's deepest reaches. It shifted with every roll and pitch, a wet, rhythmic whisper that spoke of decay and potential catastrophe. Sometimes this liquid invasion manifested closer in the maddening drip, drip, drip from unseen leaks above. A tiny, insistent percussion against a bucket, a stray piece of wood, or perhaps even the bare skin of a sleeping man. A subtle, yet profoundly intrusive sound, capable of shattering the fragile peace of a mind desperate for oblivion. Then there were the unseen inhabitants. The sharp, frantic scratching and scuttling of rats, a constant, unsettling counterpoint to the ship's deeper groans. An unseen enemy, emboldened by the darkness, moving through the labyrinthine passages, over cargo, perhaps even across the very hammocks themselves. The rustle of their passage, the gnawing at unseen things, a chilling reminder of the life that thrived in the dark, filthy corners of their world. From above, even filtered and muffled, came the sounds of the active deck watch. Distant shouts, the thump of heavy boots, the creak of the helm. These were not mere background noises. They carried an ominous weight, hinting at a change in the weather, a sighting, a sudden maneuver, keeping a subconscious part of the mind on edge, ever ready to spring into action. The howl of the wind, too, though softened by intervening decks, permeated the space as a low, mournful moan, a constant reminder of the elemental fury that surrounded them. And with every significant roll of the vessel, the dull, weighty rumble of heavy cannon shifting in their cradles, a sound that spoke of brute force and the ever-present threat of conflict. But closest of all, most intimate and inescapable, was the collective symphony of the men themselves, the deep, rumbling snores of some, the ragged, shallow breathing of others, the occasional hacking cough that rattled the confined air, or the restless turning, the shifting of bodies within their canvas cocoons. Each sigh, each muttered word in sleep, each sudden movement was a testament to unease, to lives lived on the edge. And sometimes, shattering the fragile tapestry of troubled sleep, a sharp, brief nightmare cry, quickly stifled, a window into the unspoken anxieties that plagued even the most exhausted soul. These sounds are not just background noise. They are a constant, physical reminder of the ocean's raw power and the ship's inherent fragility. A fragility that often manifested in the most insidious, unseen ways. Beneath the canvas and the creaking wood, where men sought their elusive peace, the true unseen tormentors stirred with relentless purpose. This was a war fought not with cutlass and cannon, but in the deepest hours of the night, against an insidious, omnipresent foe. First, the creepers, an inescapable army of lice, fleas, and bedbugs. Their relentless, minute claws and proboscises were a constant, pervasive itch, an irritation that gnawed at the edges of consciousness. There was no escape, no true cleanliness possible.
possible in the cramped, unsanitary confines of a pirate vessel. Clothes, skin, the very canvas of the hammock itself, all were host to these unseen invaders.
Sleep became a battle against the urge to scratch, a fragmented, interrupted dance with discomfort that left the body raw and the mind perpetually frayed. Then, the scuttlers. In the dense, humid darkness, rats, emboldened by the depths of night, became a tangible threat. Their sharp claws skittered across the floorboards. Their tiny, insistent teeth gnawed at anything edible, or even just chewable. Provisions, ropes, the very canvas that formed their beds. The terrifying possibility of a cold, whiskered body suddenly brushing against a sleeping face was not a nightmare, but a grim reality. A jolt of terror that shattered any semblance of rest. They were more than just pests. They were a constant, insidious reminder of vulnerability, of the raw, untamed nature of life at sea, even within the supposed sanctuary of sleep. And always the pervasive, penetrating dampness. It seeped into everything, a cold, heavy presence that defied the tropics and chilled to the bone. Clothes clung clammy to the skin, never truly drying, forever feeling heavy with absorbed moisture. Blankets, no matter how thick or threadbare, became saturated, a sodden weight that offered little warmth, only a pervasive chill that crept into muscles and joints, refusing to loosen its grip. Even the rough-hewn timbers of the ship itself seemed to weep, constantly sweating condensation that added to the overall misery, creating an environment where comfort was a distant, mocking memory. Finally, the very air they breathed, a thick, stagnant blanket that pressed down on all. It was a putrid, layered mix. The sour tang of bilge water sloshing beneath the floorboards, the heavy metallic scent of unwashed bodies, days of sweat and grime, stale food scraps hidden in dark corners, and the pervasive, unspoken fear of pervasive disease that permeated every breath. Each inhalation felt heavy, laden with the collective exhalations of dozens of men, trapped in a suffocating closeness. This was not the bracing air of the open sea, but an internal, suffocating world, a constant, visceral reminder of shared confinement, profound vulnerability, and the ever-present shadow of illness. Yet beyond these immediate, physical intrusions, the mind itself struggled for peace, haunted not only by present dangers, but by the specter of what lay ahead, always on guard. Here in this agitated suspension, true, deep relaxation became less a desire and more a forgotten luxury, a phantom limb of peace. Even as the body, battered and weary, screamed for rest, the mind refused to yield to oblivion. It remained on a heightened primal alert, a sentinel against the unseen and the unheard. Every groan of tortured timber, every subtle shift in the ship's motion, every distant, muffled shout from the deck watch was not just background noise, but an urgent data point. Each sound, each tremor, instantly processed and evaluated for alarm. A sudden change in the weather, the unseen approach of an enemy sail, the ominous squall brewing beyond the horizon. There was no true shutting down, no surrender to the dark. Dreams, when they managed to pierce the heavy veil of sheer exhaustion, were rarely a refuge. Instead, they were often fleeting, fractured fragments, terrifying echoes of the waking world's anxieties, twisted into nocturnal horrors. The crash of waves could become a ship splintering, the gleam of moonlight on the water, the flash of steel, the taste of salt in the air, the bitter tang of blood on the tongue. These subconscious visitations offered no solace, only a relentless reenactment of their daily struggles and fears, leaving them no less exhausted than when they lay down.
The cumulative effect of this perpetual sleep deprivation was a relentless, insidious assault on their very being. It manifested as a dull, constant ache behind the eyes, a pressure that never truly receded. An irritability simmered just beneath the surface. A hair-triggered temper always ready to ignite at the slightest provocation, fraying the bonds between men. Judgment blurred. Decisions became clouded by a haze of fatigue. And in extreme, desperate cases, the line between wakefulness and dream began to dissolve, giving rise to fleeting, unsettling hallucinations, born of profound, aching exhaustion.
Phantom figures danced in the periphery. Whispers of the non-existent tickled the ears. There was a desperate, aching longing, a profound yearning for a true, deep, undisturbed sleep, a peace that felt forever out of reach. It was a longing for stillness in a perpetually rocking world, for silence in a symphony of creaks and groans, for darkness devoid of threats. But such peace was a luxury the sea rarely granted, and the pirate's life never. The desperate, aching longing for true, deep, undisturbed sleep, a peace that felt forever out of reach, found no solace. Instead, the rude awakening arrived not gently, but abruptly, often violently. It was a brutal violation of the brief, uneasy truce with oblivion. A harsh, guttural shout from the watch, slicing through the heavy, stale air, ripped through the fragile veil of half-sleep. Perhaps it was the ear-splitting clang of a gong, reverberating with an unwelcome insistence through the very timbers of the ship, shaking men from their shallow slumber. Or, more intimately, the jarring, undeniable prod of a boot to the hammock, a physical, insistent violation that offered no possibility of further escape. The immediate jolt was not merely from sleep to wakefulness, but from a temporary, precarious oblivion to a state of full, urgent alert. The mind, already hyper-vigilant, even in rest, snapped into focus, instantly assessing the new sounds, the new urgencies. Before even rising, the heavy, inescapable weight of fatigue asserted itself, clinging to protesting limbs like a leaden blanket, binding muscles already stiff and protesting from the night's cramped, uncomfortable positions. A dull, persistent ache lodged itself deep in the joints, a constant companion that seemed to have deepened rather than diminished with the few hours of fitful rest. Eyes gritty with salt, the residue of insufficient sleep, and the lingering sting of the stagnant air
struggled against the returning dim light of the lantern, or the first weak rays filtering down from a distant hatch. Then came the scramble, a chaotic, tangled ballet of bodies and coarse canvas. Men disentangled themselves from their hammocks, their limbs still sluggish and uncooperative, their minds still hazy from the profound exhaustion. There were inevitable bumps against neighbors, low grunts of discomfort, the rustle of canvas, the creak of ropes as men swung themselves awkwardly to the deck below.
The stale, heavy air of the tween decks, which had been thick with the collective sense of sleep, sweat, and bilge, now began to mix with the bracing, albeit harsh, promise of open air filtering down from above. Perhaps, if they were fortunate, there was the faint, tantalizing, yet often disappointing smell of a meager breakfast being prepared. A smell that usually carried hints of staleness, of rations nearing their end, or of a porridge thin and unappealing. It was in this moment, amidst the renewed clamor of a waking ship, that the immediate, brutal realization struck. Another day had begun. Another day of relentless, back-breaking labor awaited, demanding constant vigilance against the sea, against other ships, against the unseen threats that lurked within the vessel itself. And with that realization came the unspoken, chilling promise of yet another restless, fragmented night to come. The cycle, a relentless, unforgiving loop, reasserted itself, mocking any hope of true respite. The pirate's life offered no true repose, only a fleeting, uneasy truce with the encroaching chaos, a continuous reminder that beyond the horizon, the coveted freedom came at a profound, unyielding cost of peace and rest.
The sanctuary of unrest, then, was not merely an uncomfortable place. It was a crucible that profoundly shaped the very being of those who sailed under the black flag. The ceaseless physical toll of discomfort, the constant dampness clinging to skin, the chronic ache in bones from sleeping on hard, unforgiving surfaces, or the ceaseless rock and roll of the ship, the relentless, creeping itch of vermin that burrowed deep into clothes and skin, all gnawed at their bodies.
This constant assault, coupled with the grinding exhaustion of sleep deprivation, slowly but surely eroded their physical resilience, leaving them prone to illness, their bodies prematurely aged, their senses dulled not just by sea air, but by a deeper, wearisome fatigue that settled in their very marrow. But the price was paid not only in flesh. The psychological hardening that came from perpetual vigilance and fragmented slumber was profound. Minds, once perhaps capable of nuanced thought, became blunted, narrowed, focused solely on immediate survival. A permanent state of hypervigilance became the default. A nervous energy thrumming beneath the surface even during moments of calm, making true relaxation impossible. Every shadow, every distant sound, every shift in the wind was automatically scanned for threat. This constant internal alarm bell, ringing endlessly, extinguished the quiet spaces where hope and peace might bloom. The erosion of hope for true restorative peace became an insidious condition,
an unspoken burden carried by every man. It meant that even when the ship lay at anchor, or when the fighting ceased, the internal struggle persisted, a silent, ceaseless battle against an invisible enemy of the mind.
This constant, fragmented sleep, more than any dramatic battle or storm, was a hidden, insidious cost of their chosen life. It wasn't a visible wound, but a slow, grinding decay, a cumulative trauma that chipped away at the very core of their humanity. Here lay the dark, bitter irony of the pirates' existence. In seeking absolute freedom from the rigid hierarchies and land-bound rules of civilization, they had unwittingly traded one form of captivity for another. Their new prison was not made of stone or iron, but woven from the relentless demands of the sea, the claustrophobia of the ship, and the internal torment of their own bodies and minds. Even the most basic human need for restorative rest, for a deep, healing oblivion, became a daily battleground, a fragile skirmish fought against the ship's constant motion, its myriad sounds, and the internal demons of fatigue and fear. It was a profound testament to the horizon's brutal promises, the lure of untamed freedom masking a reality of pervasive, unending struggle. The price of their defiant freedom, then, it seems, was not merely gold or blood, but was ultimately paid in lost sleep, a deficit that forever altered the fabric of their lives. It changed them fundamentally, leaving them perpetually restless, their spirits marked by the relentless ocean. This transformation lingered long after the last raid faded from memory, long after their days of sailing the lawless seas were done. The legacy of the pirate was not just in their plunder or their infamy, but in the deep, unyielding weariness etched into their very souls, a permanent reminder of the true cost of a life lived beyond the horizon. If you found yourself immersed in the forgotten realities of pirate life, consider subscribing to Immersive History for more journeys beyond the romanticized tales.